I have the greatest of pleasure again to introduce Professor Robert Gann. While he is retiring after 41 years of being a professor of physics and computer science at Hartwick, he has done an immense service to the college and has mentored so many students over the years, including myself, and I'm sure Jorge and Jaakko will attest that he was a great mentor to them as well. He holds a bachelor's degree from the Case Western University in both chemistry and physics, and an MS and PhD in theoretical physics from Cornell University. The top candidate way back in 1978 of 300 people applying for the position. He started working for us then in 1978 as the top candidate. After 3 years, he was a founding member of the CISC department. And he went on to receive a grant from IBM to get an MS in computer science from RPI. And then he spent a year at Yale University as a visiting scholar. A devoted mentor, he's initiated Hartwick's Awakening program for new students in the 1980s. We're in for a big treat, so I'll hand it over to you, Professor Gann. Thanks so much.
Well, thank you. Let me introduce our visitors, our guests here. It's such a pleasure to have them here. Jorge Escobar is at the Bank of America, where he is a senior vice president. His current position is quality lead in the Conversational commerce technology team. As such, he's responsible for the overall quality of the new AI tool that's being rolled out to over 25,000 financial advisors with Merrill Lynch. In that role, he oversees the efforts to ensure that their system meets the user's requirements by working with product owners, developers, testers on test strategies, test automation programs, and manual testing activities. Jaakko has been working as a software developer for the past 5 years at Nixu, which is primarily engaged in information security consulting in Northern Europe. His role has been to develop software in various security-related projects, such as building a security operations center using DevOps technology, building an Android authentication application for the construction industry, building a secure embedded Internet of Things system for large industrial corporation, and building a fault-tolerant database in Microsoft's Azure cloud. So let's go to the questions. I've got a couple questions here. Tell us about how you got to these interesting positions where you currently are. Tell us about your path from Hartwick to your current position. Who wants to go first? Jaakko, you're up there.
Jaakko. Okay, yeah, sure. Yeah, so actually both of us, Jorge and myself, got accepted to Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute for a master's program. And so the next 2 years we spent there. And then my career, I went to Belcor for 6 months as an intern. And then after that, I got a position in Finland working for Nokia. So you probably heard of Nokia phones. Although nowadays you don't really see them around very much, but 10 years ago they were still a big thing. So actually, there's you can buy a Nokia phone nowadays. There's a HMD Global is producing them nowadays, so you can actually buy a Nokia phone. But they're Android phones nowadays. So, but anyway, so I worked at Nokia. First, I was in the network side, and then I switched to the mobile phone side, and I was working on the Symbian phones. After that, well, that was the decline of Nokia at that point. So they were laying off a whole bunch of people, and so I was kind of laid off. I took the package, got some some money for that. But anyway, then I was doing. I was kind of looking for a new direction, and I ended up going back heavily into this programming stuff. So I did some geographic information systems, two companies that were doing this GIS technology. I was working for them, and then I got into this Nixu, which is a information security company. So for the past 5 years, I was working there, and I guess Dr. Gann already mentioned the kind of projects that I've worked on. So I have some hands-on experience with all these authentication protocols and security-related things. So that's pretty much my story. So.
Wait, Jorge, what about your path?
Yeah, my story is a little bit different from the point when Jaakko and I left Rensselaer. I originally went to Rensselaer. I think Jaakko mentioned that both of us got in with the help of Dr. Gann, who worked very closely with the two of us in preparation for the GRE and the application to Rensselaer. I think, Dr. Gann, you're the reason why we got in. So,
well, I have to say that thank you, Dr. Gann, for helping us get into Rensselaer.
Absolutely. Yes. So I initially thought I wanted to get into research. At the time, we were starting to play with parallel processing. There was a transputer equipment at Hartwick, 4 cores, and we were starting to get interested in that, and I was very curious about that. So I was hoping that in Rensselaer I would get a little bit more into it. Little did I know that I wasn't going to do any of that. I did take one parallel processing class though. But while at Rensselaer, I did a couple of internships at Microsoft over in Redmond and Washington State. And I got involved into something that I had never seen while working at Hartwick, which was the process that takes place. And this is, I don't know if you guys who are computer science majors out there, the process that takes place before any line of code is written. The requirements gathering, the market studying and all that. And I was completely fascinated. So I went back to Rensselaer for my second year there, and in talking to people, I said, where can I get into that kind of thing? And I didn't get a good answer. And people at Microsoft said, if you really like what you're doing right now, I was what's called the program manager in the Word group, Microsoft Word. Before it was Office, Word was a standalone product. And the guys told me, if you like that, you really don't need to finish a PhD for it. You can just, jump into that. So I went back after my second year at Rensselaer. I had completed my master's. I finished the internship because it was a second year internship. Microsoft wasn't hiring anyone at the time. This is 1993. There was a recession going on, pretty much like there is right now. So I decided to go back to my country of origin, Chile. So I went back to Chile and got into the financial services world. And long story short, after 4 years in Chile, I had actually participated in leading the building the first electronic banking platform in South America, which was absolutely new at the time, 1996, 97. There weren't many banks with fully transactional websites, believe it or not. So, while doing that, I kept thinking that I wanted to come back to the US because, that's really where things were happening. This is the .com era. Some of you may be old enough to remember that. But, anything internet related was exploding at the time. So long story short, I got in touch with a few people that were both in Silicon Valley and working in Boston. Came here in September of 1997, looking for jobs, got a few job offers, and decided to come back to the Boston area. And I got involved in consulting. That's something that I wasn't familiar with either. But in consulting, basically, you are in charge of executing a particular project. Jaakko, you also worked at consulting for a while. And we were working in all these e-commerce solutions for about 4 years and whatnot. So one thing led to another, always working in financial services. In 2006, I came across an opportunity to join a company that I think Hartwick is engaged with them, TIAA. Is that who handles your retirement
Yes.
fund administration? Right. So they offered me a position that I could take either in New York City or in Charlotte, North Carolina, where I am right now. So I decided to come to Charlotte. That was 14 years ago. And then 2008 happened, the crisis, right? So just like Jaakko was part of a layoff, I was part of a layoff. And from there, I went to work for a short time at Wells Fargo, about 1.5 years. And then I worked at Bank of America, where I am right now, initially as a consultant, and then as a full-time employee working with sales systems, sales processing systems, referrals in particular. So I worked on those systems for, about 7 years or so. And I was feeling the itch to go into something a little bit more contemporary. And at the time, Bank of America had just deployed a solution called Erica. You might have heard of it, but it's basically a chatbot that runs on your phone that you can talk to, and you can execute actually financial transactions there. So I was very, interested in that kind of thing. So I went to talk to the person that leads that team, and I said, how can I get in, basically? So they allowed me to come and work for them. That's where I am right now.
At the computer behind me, my wife is working on the same thing, and sometimes she'll ask her computer something, and I'll answer, and I get in trouble. So how is this?
But you have the right answer, probably.
Right. How has this pandemic impacted your work, and do you see these changes being permanent?
Jaakko,
Okay, sure. Yeah, so Finland was impacted by, so I'm living in Helsinki, Finland, since 1994. Yeah, so the pandemic has impacted Finland. We've had quite strict restrictions, and I think now, well, I think we're ahead of the U.S. in terms of the timeline for the epidemic. So we're in pretty good situation right now. I think we have very few new infections, and but basically in terms of what happened in terms of the workplace was that we started this remote working, and for Nixu, which is this information security information consulting company. Well, I guess it didn't impact our business very much in it, and in the short term, and in the long term, I think it's actually probably beneficial for this kind of security consulting, because the more people work remotely, then the more important the network security and the terminal security and all this kind of stuff becomes. So I think Nixu is weathering the storm pretty well right now. There were some restructuring in the spring, so but quite minor. So, but anyway, so how do I see the future? Well, just I think there will be more of this remote work, definitely, but I think there's also the other side. So I mean, people need people around them, so because we're humans and we like to have other modes of communication besides just voice and well, okay, an image in a computer screen is not the same thing as meeting the real person. So I would say as soon as this pandemic is in better shape in terms of well, you either get a vaccine or then it just kind of dies off by itself. I think there will be more of, I mean, people demand this kind of personal interaction, and so I think we will be going back to that, more of that, but perhaps not as much as before the pandemic. that's just my opinion. So.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. But in my case, I work right now with a company that has over 230,000 employees worldwide, right? So it's not uncommon that prior to this, we had to work with people who are not physically next to us. So as a matter of fact, the bank used to have a program that was very popular about 10 years ago. It's called My Work. And it was a program that allowed people to work remotely, primarily because, you know, the hyper growth, all the mergers and acquisitions, you know, you ended up with teams that were geographically divided and whatnot. So a lot of people went to this My Work program. And over the years, the bank started calling people back. And, you know, no more My Work, you know, everyone needs to be at the office. And then that coincided with a shift in methodologies, at least on the IT and the line of business facing IT. We went from the traditional waterfall methodology that, you know, allows you to do requirements, design, implementation, testing, and deployment. Very straightforward, right? Long cycles for large systems, year-long projects, multi-year-long projects. And we did a switch into a methodology that's very popular right now, that if you guys computer scientists are not into it, get into it. It's called Agile development, which is no longer these monolithical phases, but in one sprint or a 2-week, 3-week period, you're going to specify a functionality, you're going to design it, implement it, test it, and hopefully deploy it, right, around the same time. But one of the tenets of Agile is that people need to be co-located for the same reasons that Jaakko just said. You know, interaction, you know, in-person interaction is so much more efficient. You know, being able to turn around and say, hey, how about this? And get an answer right away without, you know, waiting for somebody to not be busy online, you know, don't call on the phone. So now with this pandemic thing, everyone working remotely, what do you do with Agile, right? That was sort of the big question out there. For the most part, you know, using technologies like what we're doing right now, we've been able to continue working together. The productivity actually has increased, but it's probably because we're working longer. It's not because we're more efficient right now. There's nothing like in-person collaboration. So, you know, is it going to stay like that? Probably not. But one thing for sure is that nobody can say from, you know, corporate planning and all that, that this doesn't work, because we have proven that it does work, right? The question that is still out there is, you know, before the Agile team was 100% in the office, now the Agile team is 100% working from home. The question that it's not answered yet is what happens when there's a part of the team in the office and a part of the team at home, right? How do you combine and make sure that everyone is aware that, you know, about everything else that's going on? So that question, still unanswered. I think we're going to get to that hopefully sooner rather than later.
Okay, Jorge,
Yes.
What advice would you give yourself looking back when you were a student at Hartwick, and would it be different for Carla? I'll put you on the spot with her. What advice would you give to Carla, and what advice would you give to you back when you were a student?
Well, knowing now and being aware of all the things that we did not have, we were just talking prior to it, that Jaakko and I studied in a pre-internet era, right? Hartwick was one of the few schools that had a BitNet connection to Rensselaer, and Rensselaer was connected to the internet. So I remember I sent the first email from Oneonta to Germany back in 1990, I think it was. The first email. Had I been aware of the explosion that was going to happen with, you know, the internet and the communications and all that, I think I would have been a little bit quicker to jump into that. I think the ability to communicate with others, the ability to obtain instant information, the ability to dig deeper into pretty much any field that you want, is something that everyone should exploit when they're in college, right? The other thing is that, you know, luckily we studied at Hartwick, where the computer science department was small enough for us never to really have lectures. We had conversations. And Dr. Gann, I mean, I thank you so much for the way you taught us. Sometimes we would be in the room next to your office in Miller, right? And there would be 5, 6 students, and it was a conversation. You know, it was dialogue, bi-directional dialogue, which at least, you know, it allowed me, from my style of learning, to really get into things. Now, the one thing that I wish I had more vision to is more independent study, right? One of the things I learned from attending Hartwick is that there's no way you're going to learn everything you need from, you know, a bachelor's degree, even a master's degree. There's so much out there that, you know, there's no time to take classes. What Hartwick does, and I think we're going to talk about that in a future question too, what Hartwick does, and it's uniquely positioned to do, is to give you that kind of personalized support that allows you to take on things that are not necessarily part of the curriculum and go as far as you want with it. You have advisors like Dr. Gann who will work with you, will point you in some directions. And you now have the internet where you can reach field experts, alumni, you know, people who may be researching something that you're interested in doing, and you can actually go out and talk to those people. So that would be the advice, you know, use the network, go outside what's strictly required at Hartwick.
Jaakko, any thoughts?
Well, I hadn't really thought too much about this, but well, certainly, I mean, looking back, there's you can see all these technology trends and different things that have happened, and well, I guess one thing that I've realized is that you should probably try to kind of jump on the bandwagon, because that's, well, I'm not sure if this is good advice or not, but maybe the good advice would be to follow your heart and do what you think, what you're really interested in. But on the other hand, if you want to also make some money, well, then you kind of have to follow the bandwagon on these big shifts. Like for example, I was in the telecommunications industry for 17 years, so obviously I was, you know, following the trend there. So it was a big trend, a big industry. I was part of it, and I was, you know, making a good living. So that's I guess one thing that you can think of. The other thing about, certainly I'd like to say about Hartwick. So I agree with what Jorge was saying, that I think this kind of liberal arts college is good because it really gives you access to the professors, and like you have small teaching classes, etc. So you can really leverage that and try to get the most out of your education. So that's something that you should do, I think.
I always feel like, as a computer science professor, all I really do is help people get their first job. After that, it's really up to their liberal arts background to carry them. I tend to have all these first-year students come in, and they want to learn all about the latest software and the latest hardware. It's almost like they're saying, open up my head and pour in all this knowledge. And I have to tell them, this is going to be totally obsolete in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. The thing that matters is learning to solve problems, work with people of all different types, learn how to learn new things, how to communicate ideas, things like that. Could you put in a supporting word for my predecessors who are trying to do this?
Okay, yeah, sure, I can comment. So yeah, I agree that that these basic things like problem solving and communication skills and getting along with people and all this kind of thing is definitely, those are skills that you need. It's a skill set that that can take you, well, that you need those skills no matter what kind of position you end up having. So yeah, definitely that's a strong point of this kind of liberal arts kind of education. And the other thing, I can say that you probably, well, this is, I guess, something that's always said in this liberal arts advertising, is that you end up having so many different jobs during your career that and you might end up having to change careers, go to different field, etc. So having this kind of good basis in communication skills and problem solving, then you can just apply those skills to basically any field if you need to change fields, for example. So
yeah, one of the things that I feel, and it's not just Hartwick, but you know, pretty much any university, the biggest paradigm difference between a university setting and the real world is that, at least in the fields, in the jobs and the roles that I've been in, even if you don't have direct reports, people who work, you know, under you, you're always working in a team, always. Where you don't control the beginning and the end necessarily, you depend on other people, right? And the difference with college is that, you know, at the end of the day, you are taking the classes, you're taking the exams, you're getting the grades, right? It's you. You may have an opportunity to work in teams. And my advice would be, take every opportunity to work in a team that you can do. Every single time. And you're going to learn the challenges of working with people that don't necessarily understand what you're saying, or you don't understand what they're saying, not because you speak a different language, but because it's very difficult to convey an idea that it's in your head, right? You may know exactly where you're going, the person next to you doesn't, or they think they should go somewhere else. Well, the real life is like that every single day. And I think Hartwick, with the liberal arts education, gives people the tools, if you actually take them, to be able to work in that kind of environment. So take the opportunities to work as a team, even try to lead a team, right? Take turns leading the team, take turns following, right? And see how that goes. That would be, you know, one thing that I would advise.
Interest in AI has been surging and then fading out since the 1960s. A little over a decade ago, with our much more powerful, vastly more powerful computers and the growth of all this data on the internet, we've really gotten into machine intelligence. Where do you see that going in the future? You've gotten into that area.
Yeah, and it's one of the reasons why I decided to get into it, because now, you know, computers are powerful enough to look at you know, all these searches and algorithms and things. So as a matter of fact, on Friday I was reading that Google now is deploying something called SODA, and it's basically an on-device. It's on the Pixel phones. There's an entire neural network there with all the grammar and everything required to do natural language processing. Imagine that. On the phone, is deployed. It's less than a gig of RAM. I think it's half a gig or something. But it runs on the phone. We wouldn't even think about that 20 years ago. So the capabilities are there. I think the algorithms, machine learning in particular, needs a little bit more work. It's not where it can be right now 100%. I'm working with technologies called supervised learning. We're now adding neural networks to a battery of things. It's a hot field. It's super hot field. And to me, you know, one of the things that it's going to disappear, within the next 5 years or so is IVRs, for instance, interactive voice response systems, where you call a company and you say, press 1 if you do this. What are you calling about? Right now there's a little bit of voice recognition, and they put you eventually in front of somebody who can answer your question. Well, with the technology that we have right now, I can see that 80% of the time, 90% of the time, the machine will be able to answer the question, right? You will not need to go and speak to somebody else who's going to be reading the answer from a catalog anyway, right, or their own experience. But definitely it's here to stay. So be familiar with it, hopefully get involved, and that's the future.
Jaakko, you've really gotten involved a lot in cybersecurity. The one thing I've been wondering about, the computer science department at Hartwick has developed a cybersecurity track. Do you think the need for cybersecurity is going to increase as people get more and more clever? Or as things move up into the cloud and we don't have perhaps so many personal computers and stuff, is it possible that the need for cybersecurity might decrease?
That's a good question. I guess. So I'm just a software developer, so I'm not making strategy for Nixu Corporation or any other company. So that's my caveat. But yeah, so well, personally, I think there's still a huge need for security specialists. So I mean, we're getting more and more of these connected devices, this Internet of Things, okay, then we're getting more of this cloud, and that was one of the discussions at Nixu, obviously, was that if we're doing security consulting, then and everything's going into the cloud, well, are we going to be out of business? Because everything's in the cloud, and the cloud supposedly is secure. Etc. So yeah, so that's a very good question, I think. But like I said, I think because of this IoT and also this cloud is not as secure as, well, basically you have to trust the cloud provider because they have your secrets. So that's a fact. So if you don't trust anyone with your data, with your secret keys, then you can't have your stuff on the cloud. So that's my perspective. So if you want to be really secure, don't put your stuff on the cloud. And then one other thing, what was I going to say? Well, yeah. So I think people need to have an understanding of security and how things actually work, how encryption works, and how protocols work. So I think there will always be a need for security specialists. But whether that trend is up or down, I would say in the short term it's up. Possibly in the future, if everything goes to the cloud, if we trust our cloud providers, then there might be a decrease at some point. So that's my take on this.
What do you think, Jorge?
I agree. The cloud is definitely a piece of technology that is changing the way things and people work. Having said that, I work for a bank. You would think that a bank, it's number one, it's got secrets, and number two, it's got the money. So we don't have everything in the cloud for the same reasons that Jaakko is discussing. Amazon really wants us to do a lot of processing with them, but there's just it's a process. I think the technology, for the most part, allows you to have a good deal of security, but as Jaakko said, at this point, cybersecurity and information security at the bank is one of the few areas that it's growing left and right. I don't know if it's going to decrease when eventually we move things to the cloud, but at this point, it's paramount. It's very important. So I mean, I'm glad you guys are doing the program at Hartwick, because that's you know, good background for students.
Yeah, one more comment. So
Sure.
the other thing is this kind of administrative or regulation environment. So for example, in the EU, we have this GDPR for data privacy. So then we cannot, as an EU company, you can't put your customer data in a US site, for example, because then the data is leaving the EU, it's going to the US, and therefore then it's not regulated by the EU anymore. So this kind of regulatory issues, and also national, it might not be like EU level, it could be even national. I think that the governments control the banks and tell them, you know, where you can put your data. So that's obviously another restriction that can affect your choice. So.
What qualities are you looking for when you hire someone?
So in my previous role, I was hiring a lot of people, and I work with these consultancies who ask me the same thing every time they were presenting candidates for me. The first thing I told them is I want somebody who's curious. I want somebody who is a problem solver. And they said, well, but how do we determine that? I said, well, it's your job. You know, if I'm going to do it on my end, you know, why do I have you? But basically, those are two things that, you know, at the end of the day, play a very important role. Be curious, be willing to, you know, go and learn something if you don't know it, or learn more about it. Try to always think that your role, pretty much in any job that you have, is solving a problem, right? There's not a single day that goes into my world where I don't have to participate in solving a problem. It can be small, it can be big, it can be quick, it can be slow, but it's always solving a problem.
I snuck one of our graduates into Apple. He had a job interview as a network specialist, and he'd never taken a networks course. And he came to me and said, what do I do? I got to fly out there, be interviewed as a network specialist, and he must have misread my resume. And I said, here's the best graduate book on networking. Read the first chapter over and over as you fly across the country. Go in there and just start asking questions. Don't even give them a chance to ask you a question. Just come in with boundless energy and enthusiasm and start asking them how everything works and why they do it that way and so on.
He got the job. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I would just like to, okay, sorry.
No, go for it. We have questions, but I want you to answer first.
Yeah, okay, I was just gonna say that I was actually a small team lead for 4 years during my Nokia years, so I did end up hiring some people. But yeah, so I think what Jorge said, those two features or attitude. So you have to be curious, you have to want to learn more. And then, well, what was the other thing? Well, anyway, you have basically working is, okay, problem solving was the other thing, right? So you have to be able to solve some problems. So I would second those two qualities in job applicants.
Great. Thank you. That was one of the questions the audience had. So thank you, Dr. Gann, for helping me out. We have another question. They are interested in hearing, you both have had experience working in the US as well as internationally in Chile or Finland. And they're curious about what that experience was. Is there different cultures in the computer science world?
Jaakko, you want to take that first?
Okay, sure. So I don't have much work experience in the U.S. So I worked at Bell Communications Research for 6 months. So certainly it's kind of a research kind of place to work, which is where I ended up at Nokia. I was working at Nokia Research Center for 10 years. So I guess I kind of like this research kind of environment. But in terms of differences, haven't really thought about this. So I think Finns are different people than the Americans or generic Americans. So the culture is different. So it's not so much kind of the social aspects aren't maybe as important. Certainly, I mean, in a corporate environment, okay, communication skills are always important. Responsibility, if you're given a responsibility, you have to fulfill your responsibility, make your manager happy. So I think those kind of things are always the same, no matter where you are. So if you need to do your job well and to go forward in your career. So, but honestly, I can't really nail that one very well. Sorry.
I've only worked in two places, Chile and the U.S. In Chile, I did work for 4 years in financial services as well. And, the Chilean culture is obviously very different than the U.S. And to me, the main difference was the multiculturalism that we have here in the U.S. And Chile is a very homogeneous society. It was back when I worked there, 20 years ago or 25 years ago. It was very rare to find somebody from another country, and even more rare to find somebody who did not speak Spanish, right? We had one colleague who was a girl from Brazil, but she spoke Spanish, and everyone was, the Brazilian. Here in the U.S., it's one of the things that I really like about it is that we are in contact with everyone and from every culture, every language, and everyone brings their own unique traits and interests and perspectives to the workplace. The other thing that's different between Chile and here is that your career is a lot more dynamic here. And initially, it was a turnoff for me to see that in the .com years, a lot of people who had never opened a computer science book called themselves a web developer, right? And to a certain extent, today in the US, you can get a web developer certificate in under a year. And you can actually make some very decent money. And those are the people who are going to competing with you, right? So you need to be aware of that, right? And position yourself as, yes, I do have a computer science degree, and here's, the part that computer science degree gives me that you don't get in a 7-month Java development or web development environment, right? So learn how to position that, and that helps. But, like Jaakko said, at the end of the day, you work by objectives. Number one, you need to meet your objectives, right? If you're not meeting the objectives, then, you need to do something different.
Well, I just have a question too. You think about, I always think of computer science and software development as trying to understand new languages, right? Would having a language background help more so than a computer science in some ways, being able to kind of think differently and interpret, would that help? Does that help in the computer science world?
I think it does.
Mm-hmm.
I think it does. You are used to conceptualizing things, right? So the words come after the concept. Same thing with computer languages. I think you can learn a computer language a lot faster than you can learn a spoken language. Mm-hmm. The conceptualizing things and identifying what's core for a given language and everything else that goes in the periphery is very similar, you know, when you're developing and when you're learning another language, I think. I don't know, Jaakko. Jaakko used to speak Mandarin Chinese, and have you spoken that lately?
Well, I wouldn't advertise my Chinese speaking abilities at this point. But yeah, so I'm sure, yeah, knowing multiple languages helps you conceptualize things better. And so, okay, I don't know if I can really comment on that very much, but yeah, so computer languages are rather trivial compared to real languages, but on the other hand, you have these different paradigms in these programming languages, which are kind of different. So it's good to be familiar with these different paradigms, like this functional programming, for example. And then, of course, parallel programming would be very different also. So.
Thank you. That helps a lot. So we have another question. I'm sorry. So they're curious about kind of, you both talked about a lot of pathways that you've taken and kind of you've weaved in and out your career. Can you expand a little bit on certain particular times in your career that were really instrumental to where you've gotten to today? Kind of the highlights that really kind of directed you to what you're doing today.
Well, I'll take that one. And to me, I was lucky enough that it happened early enough when I did those internships at Microsoft, you know, that opened my eyes into something that really, you know, I felt inspired on doing. How do you work with business people in defining the problems in such a way that you can solve the problem via a system, a computer program, right? I never did a lot of programming as a professional. I only did full-time programming for about 1.5 years when I was in Chile. Because to me, the computer programming came after developing the ideas and putting them in such a language that a computer programmer could implement it. Mm-hmm. That was a very defining moment for me. And the second defining moment was at some point I started leading a team. That was back when I did the internet home banking solution back in Chile. And I really liked that. I really liked it. Interestingly enough, one thing that gave me a good background for that was being an RA at Hartwick. I was an RA as a senior in Saxton Hall, and I never thought that would be you know, sort of excellent preparation. And as a matter of fact, I recommended it to my daughter Carla, who was also an RA in her high school and in college as well. Being the face, not necessarily having the authority, because you don't have much authority as an RA, and most of the time at work you don't have a lot of authority either, right? But people are looking up to you to solve questions, solve problems, answer questions, and show the direction, right? If you share the direction and people understand where they need to go, you know, all things kind of come together. So those were kind of my defining moments.
Great. You were a mentor and the RA helped you.
That's right.
How about you, Jaakko? What was kind of the highlights in your careers that helped?
Well, that's a tough question. Well, yeah, okay. I guess maybe one of the key things for me was to kind of find my own direction and so I like being a problem solver. I think for a few years there in my Nokia career, I was a team lead, then I was a product owner, then I was a project manager, you know, this kind of stuff. And then I turned back to this development work. So I kind of went back to this this programming as something that I enjoy doing, and so maybe that's one of my learnings along the way. So I guess the maybe the worrying question is that in my demographic, people usually don't program anymore. So I don't know how long I can sustain my position as a programmer. So
Really?
But anyway, well, we'll see what the future brings. Well, programming is it's a very intense mental kind of state. You have to be in a flow state, and you have to be, you know, processing information and coming up with these solutions. So I would say it's probably better for a younger mind than an older mind. But hopefully I'm not, well, we'll see what happens.
Well, it sounds like both of you have had a lot of different, and you've broadened your skill sets in many different ways throughout your career. And I think that's kind of a real asset probably in your world as it's changing. And, you know, just like our students, they're going to have to reinvent themselves probably 10 times during their career because the jobs that are here now are not in the future. So I appreciate that. I just one more question, which I like to leave because we are running out of time, but I always like to ask, what's the, you know, as our students are looking for jobs and internships, and, you know, how can they, what would be your best advice of what they take advantage of Hartwick right now to help prepare them for their career?
Start on day one, right? Identifying people in the fields that they want to go and start communicating with those people right away. Don't wait, you know, until 2 weeks before the end of classes to start looking for an internship, right? This is not going to happen. Unfortunately, right, Oneonta is not a very, you know, technologically booming place, but now you have the internet, right? So there's no excuse for not knowing, you know, what's out there, who's where. You know, I used the Peterson guide that I found in the library to write to contact names in companies that I thought, you know, could give me an internship. That's how I secured an internship later on at Microsoft, right? I had to go to a book. Now you get real-time information, right? So network, and at the same time, try to find things that interest you in your field. It doesn't have to be everything, but try a few things and try to get into it sooner rather than later. That way you will have a common language when you approach somebody who you don't know, and maybe that can be, you know, alumni or an alumnus, or it can be somebody that, you know, all of a sudden posted a comment online on something, right? If you can reply and ask an intelligent question and say, you know, I want to get into it. What do you recommend? Right? Do it from day one. And that's why I think, you know, when I read about the reshuffling of your program, where from day one, you're going to work with students in creating a pathway, that's a fantastic way of doing it. But students need to be proactive, right? They need to be in control. That's the other thing that I wanted to make sure I stressed. The college is not going to create your career for you. You have to create it for you, right? And the sooner you understand that, the better you're going to be.
We're starting, if I could interject, we're starting to make that with something we're calling the Promise Initiative that we're rolling out this fall. And I've always, as one part of it that I want to get implemented, I've always thought the senior project should be a freshman project.
Right.
Well, we've got the right person on here, Paula Lees, our VP of Advancement and Career Services, as well as Communications.
I'm so sorry I was late. My internet was fighting me tooth and nail. Jorge, Jaakko, Professor Gann, this has been extraordinary. Thank you so much. What a great session. And I loved what you just said, Jorge, and Bob's absolutely right. We are embedding career development from the first year seminar all the way through the senior capstone, and we're looking for alumni like you that can help mentor our students and continue to provide advice. So thank you so much for your time today. This was great fun. I really appreciated it. Bob, as always, thank you so much for being such a great partner with College Advancement and Alumni Relations. We really appreciate it.